Tuesday morning looked ordinary, until it didn't. I was hunched on the edge of my futon with a chipped mug of instant coffee cooling between my palms, the kind of bitter you drink because the rent's due and your card is maxed and the day doesn't care. My phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't. Miss Fisher? This is Roberta Adams from Adams & Associates. I'm calling about your grandmother's estate. The room tilted. My grandmother? Wilhelmina Fischer. I'm sorry for your loss. Loss implies possession. I hadn't possessed my grandmother in years, not since the family fractured along the fault line of my mother's drinking and my own stubborn loyalty. I pressed my thumb into the ceramic crack of the mug like it could hold me steady. What does this have to do with me? You're listed as her sole heir. Paper rustled. She's left you an apartment building. We'll need your signature on several documents, and there are management matters you should be briefed on. I laughed, a short disbelieving sound that didn't belong to me. An apartment building. 6 units, Riverside District. It's been her primary income for 30 years. The call ended with an address, a time, and the kind of polite finality lawyers are paid to deliver. I stared at the blank wall above my sink, at the off-white square where a painting should have hung if I'd ever learned how to keep beautiful things. 2 days later, I stood on a quiet riverside block and looked up at 4 stories of varnished brick and bay windows holding slices of sky. The building wasn't loud about its worth. It just was, the way a woman with old money wears a watch you can't pronounce. Flowering pear trees lifted pale crowns along the sidewalk. A wrought iron fence trimmed the small front garden into compliance. In the foyer, an antique mirror threw my reflection back at me. Clara Fischer in a thrifted blazer, city wind in my hair, hopes cinched tight like a belt I couldn't quite breathe under. Miss Fisher? A woman with intelligent eyes and a clipboard met me by the mailboxes. Linda Benson. I'm the property manager. I worked for your grandmother for, a long time. We shook. Her hand was cool, efficient. I don't know anything about buildings. I barely keep my studio alive. That's all right. She offered a practiced smile with worry in its corners. There are some particulars we should go over. I followed her through the polished corridor. The floors were oak, their shine rippling with the war stories of decades. On the walls hung framed black and white photos of the building's early years. Men in hats, women with gloved hands, a young sailor kissing his wife on the steps. It felt less like a property and more like a memory palace. In the small office behind the foyer, Linda closed the door and placed the clipboard on the desk like a verdict. The truth is, she began, the building's been losing money for years. How? It looks perfect. It is well kept, her jaw tightened. But there's a situation we've never been able to resolve. Your grandmother refused to discuss it. Go on. There's a tenant in 4B, the penthouse. Her name is Paula Hendress. Linda looked at me the way people look at you right before they tell you something that will rearrange your bones. She hasn't paid a single dollar in rent for 30 years. The sentence didn't land all at once. It sank through me slowly, like a stone sliding down a riverbed, bumping every rock before it vanished into the silt. 30 years? The math began to claw at the inside of my skull. Why wasn't she evicted? Your grandmother wouldn't allow it. Every time I raised it, she said, Paula stays, and changed the subject. There's no lease on file, no written rationale. How much? My voice cracked. I swallowed. How much is 4B worth at market? Approximately $3,500 a month. Over 30 decades, she ran the numbers like she'd run them 1,000 times, over $1 million in lost revenue. Air went thin. I saw my credit score, my student loans, the red-slapped late fee on my last electric bill, all lined up like a firing squad. I felt foolish, angry. A heat flushed up my neck. What is she like, this Paula? Private, polite, now in her 70s, keeps to herself, never explains, just says it was arranged with Miss Fisher, your grandmother. My grandmother's name, formal and crisp, felt like a door closing behind me. It wasn't arranged with me. I'd like to talk to her, now. Linda hesitated. Your grandmother left one specific instruction: no harassment of Miss Hendress. I'm not suggesting harassment, but I'm suggesting a conversation. I smiled without my eyes. I'll be respectful. The elevator hummed old and loyal as it lifted me. On the 4th floor, the hallway was quiet, in that expensive way, sound teased into silence. At the end, where the corridor met an ocean of afternoon light, a solid oak door waited with a brass nameplate, P. Hendress. The letters were worn by years of fingertips. I knocked. From inside, "One moment, please." A voice like well-loved paper, soft, cultured, holding its creases. The door opened onto a woman who could have been carved from the same oak. Silver hair gathered in a bun, wire-rimmed glasses, a cardigan the color of evening fog. Her eyes, clear, blue, assessing, took me in and, to my shock, warmed. "You must be Clara," she said. "You have your grandmother's mouth when you're trying to hide your temper." Heat rose to my cheeks. "Miss Hendress, may I come in?" "Of course." The apartment unfurled. Crown moldings, herringbone floors, windows that stitched the river to the skyline. The furniture was not rich, it was right. A wingback facing a modest sofa, a tea service on a low table, books everywhere, their spines like a muted choir. There were photographs, too. Not posed, not hungry for eyes. Moments caught because they mattered to someone. "Tea?" she asked. "No, thank you." I stayed standing. The words pushed, urgent. "I'll be direct. I inherited this building 2 days ago. I learned you haven't paid rent in 3 decades. I can't continue that arrangement. Either you begin paying market rate or you vacate." She did not flinch. She sat with careful grace and gestured to the opposite chair. "You speak like a woman who's been chased by numbers." I didn't sit. "I speak like an owner who can't afford $1 million charity." A smile touched the edge of her mouth and vanished. "Charity is a curious word." She folded her hands. "I won't argue with you. I'll ask for a favor. You're not in a position to... a favor that will take an hour." Her eyes held mine without blinking. "Go to the basement storage room. Find your grandmother's old business ledgers. Look for my name, Paula Hendress. Read what you find, then come back, and we'll talk like adults and not like enemies." "Why would your name be in—" "Because, Miss Fisher," she said gently, "nothing in this building is as simple as owed and owing. Anger is easier than fear. It's a shield you can lift, even if it's heavy." I lifted it now. "If this is a stall—" "It isn't." She tilted her head, not pleading, simply present. "Your grandmother trusted you to be fair. Prove her right." The basement smelled like dust and stories. A single pull-chain bulb pooled honey onto concrete. Rows of metal shelves held boxes labeled in the sharp, decisive script I recognized from birthday cards. W. Fisher. I found the section marked 1990 to 1995, dragged out a crate, and lifted a ledger bound in scuffed leather that felt warm from other hands. My grandmother's entries were tight, meticulous, intimate with every penny. Rents in, repairs out, taxes, contracts, invoices. I read July 1993 once, twice, 3 times before the words stopped swimming. July 15th, 1993. Emergency loan from P. Hendress, $250,000. Terms, interest-free. Repayment, none required. Collateral, none. The concrete under my feet shifted. Just a degree, just enough to make balance a decision. I flip forward. August 3rd, 1993. Additional loan from P. Endress, $150,000. Same terms. September 12th, 1993. Final loan installment from P. Hendress, $100,000. Total, $500,000. $500,000, $1993. I found another ledger, Crisis Management, 1993, and the entries cut like glass. June 30th, bank notice. Foreclosure begins July 31st unless $400,000 paid. July 1st, all assets at risk. Bankruptcy imminent. July 14th, P. Hendress offers assistance. Miracle! Heat prickled the back of my neck. I turned the page with care I usually reserve for faces, and there it was. July 20th, agreement with P. Hendress finalized. Loan, $500,000. Interest, 0%. Repayment, none. Condition, lifetime residence in apartment 4B, no rent. July 22nd, bank paid, foreclosure avoided. Business saved. A manila folder slid out from the back of the box like a secret that wanted to be known. P. Hendress, private. Inside, photocopies of an agreement, signatures in ink that had bled into paper fibers, a handwritten note in my grandmother's unmistakable, slightly right-leaning hand. Paula is not saving a building. She is saving our future. 4B is a small price for what we keep: jobs, dignity, our name. I will honor this until my last breath. I sat on the cold floor among the dust and the numbers and felt something unfasten in my chest. The ledger pages trembled because my hands did. In 1993, Paula Hendress had walked into my grandmother's collapsing life and laid down $500,000 with no interest, no repayment, just a key, a home, a promise. My grandmother had built the next decades of our family on the bedrock of that mercy. The rent I was counting wasn't money lost, it was a debt paid every month to the woman who had made us solvent. When I looked up, the single bulb hummed like a heart. Back upstairs, the hall held its breath. I knocked once. The door opened as if she had been standing behind it, listening for the hinge. "You found them," Paula said. I found everything. The words scraped my throat on the way out. "Miss Hendress, Paula, I am sorry." She stepped back, the smallest welcome. "Come in, Clara. Sit. There's tea." This time I sat. The cup was warm against my palms, steam curling descent of bergamot into the afternoon. "You saved my grandmother," I whispered. Her smile was quiet and real. "Your grandmother saved herself. I offered a tool." $500,000 is more than a tool. "Money," she said, pouring her own tea, "is only a tool when you decide it is. Otherwise, it's just a mirror." I looked at her, really looked at her, not as a line on a ledger, not as a problem to solve, but as a woman who had altered the trajectory of a family with an act that didn't fit inside any column labeled profit. Why? Why would you do that for a woman you barely knew? Paula stirred her cup once, twice, set the spoon down so gently it didn't touch the saucer's rim. "Because I recognized something in Billy, your grandmother, that I once had and nearly lost: integrity. And because, if I'm honest," she lifted her eyes to mine, "I wanted a home that wasn't measured in square footage." I felt my face crumble and hold at the same time. And 4B was the price. 4B was the promise. She leaned back, blue eyes steady. "Now that you know, we can decide what to do next." The tea warmed my hands. The truth warmed something colder. "Next," I said, "we talk." The tea cooled between us before I found the courage to speak again. "So you gave her $500,000 and asked for nothing?" Paula's eyes softened. Not nothing. I asked for a roof, a community, and the right to keep breathing without watching a portfolio. Her words clung to me long after I left 4B. Downstairs, I spread the ledgers and contracts across the desk in the small office. The fountain pen signatures glowed faintly blue, even after 30 years. Every entry, every dated note, traced a woman's attempt to survive by trusting another. My grandmother's handwriting, the same loops I'd seen on grocery lists, confessed entire decades in ink. I owe my peace to Paula Hendress. I leaned back, blinking hard. I had come here ready to reclaim debt. Instead, I found proof of a debt that could never be repaid. The next morning, I called Linda to the office. "She's been telling the truth," I said. Linda's eyebrows lifted. "You saw the documents?" "Yes. Paula saved my grandmother's business. She paid off a foreclosure. She owns her piece in that apartment." Linda exhaled slowly, relief unwinding her shoulders. "Then maybe now the building can finally breathe too." I looked at the thick folders stacked like gravestones of good intentions. "Linda, what do we actually owe the tenants?" "What do you mean?" "My grandmother ran this place like a sanctuary, not an enterprise. I need to understand what that meant." Linda smiled, a small, loyal curve. "Start with them. Listen. They'll tell you." That night, the building spoke. From 1B drifted the crying of a newborn and the quiet shushing of exhausted parents. From 2A came a television murmuring through the walls, old sitcom laughter and the metallic rattle of someone knitting. From 3A, the sound of a guitar, hesitant but alive. And from above, a phonograph needle crackled through something classical, something that felt like memory turned into sound. Paula Hendress. I climbed the stairs again. This time, my knock was gentler. "You opened the door before I could speak." "You've been reading." "I have." I handed her a folder. "You should keep these." "No." She pushed it back. "They're your family story now." We sat, the evening burning amber behind the window panes. I said, "My grandmother wrote that you saved her name. She said 4B was the small price for what she kept." Paula smiled faintly. "Billy always did underestimate her worth." I watched the city outside, streetlights flicking on one by one, turning the avenue into a river of amber. "I don't know how to thank you." "Then don't," she said. "Live like she did. Make this place mean something." A long silence settled. Somewhere below, a door slammed, and laughter climbed the stairwell. "You know," Paula murmured, "when I walked into this building in 93, I thought I was buying peace. What I found was purpose." "Purpose?" She nodded. "Your grandmother reminded me that money means nothing if it can't build shelter for someone else. She taught me generosity that isn't a transaction." Her hands, veined and elegant, wrapped around the teacup. "The world doesn't remember women like her, Clara. We build things quietly and call them obligations instead of legacies." The words struck me harder than she knew. Later that night, alone in the office, I found a key taped inside the final ledger, on a yellow note in my grandmother's hand. "For Clara. Use it when you're ready to see." It fit the drawer at the bottom of the desk, one I hadn't noticed locked. Inside, a sealed envelope rested on a stack of faded receipts. The letter began in blue ink. "Clara, if you're reading this, the building is yours. But remember, you do not own people's lives, only the trust they give you. Paula taught me that. I was once saved by compassion that had no price tag. When the world demanded I choose profit over people, she reminded me who I was. Promise me you'll guard this building's soul the way she guarded mine. Grandma Billy." Tears blurred the last line until the words melted into one another. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. The office smelled of paper and dust and a hint of Paula's tea drifting up through the vents. For the first time since the phone call, I felt home. Morning slid through 4B like silk, soft and certain. When I knocked, Paula already had the kettle on and 2 plates set with buttered toast that tasted like childhood, if childhood had ever been gentle. "We're going to walk the building," she said, as if we'd planned it for weeks. "Bring a notebook you won't be afraid to ruin." "I have exactly one of those," I said, and she smiled without looking up from the tea. We started at the roof. Wind worried the antenna, gulls skimmed the river's skin, Paula's hands touched flashing, tar seams, the lip of a drain. She didn't move like a tenant, she moved like someone who had memorized this place, one repair at a time. "Roof's due in 2 years, 3 if you're lucky. Don't be lucky, be early." I wrote, "Roof, budget now, replace next spring, no drama." It felt like writing a vow. On 3, the elevator doors breathed open with that old faithful sigh. Hums when it should hum, grinds when it's insulted. You can hear the difference if you're quiet. We listened. I heard it. The faint scold in the cable, a whisper of neglect. "You paid for the modernization in 2005, I said, testing what I now knew. She didn't deny it. "Your grandmother argued with me for 3 months. I let her win on a Tuesday and ordered the work on Wednesday." "You let her win?" "She made it feel like a partner, because she was. Pride doesn't ruin agreements, secrecy does." On 2, we paused outside 2A. A crocheted wreath hung on the door. Pale blues, stitched roses. "Mrs. Perry," Paula murmured, "prepared to tell you she doesn't need a thing." She knocked, then stepped back like she was offering a stage. The chain slid, the door opened, and a face like parchment and summer peaches peered out. "Paula! And you must be the granddaughter." "Clara," I said. "May we?" We were invited in before the question finished forming. It was a room knitted from patience. Doilies, framed cross-stitch verses, a lemon tree grown from a hopeful seed on the sill. The window unit air conditioner sulked in the heat, spitting more noise than anything else. "Mrs. Perry," I said, "how's the AC treating you?" "Like an ex-husband," she said, straight-faced. Then she winked. "Pardon my language." We laughed, and that broke the room open. 20 minutes later, I had the full saga. 3 summers of rattling, a tech who hadn't called back, and a fixed income stretched thin as thread. "We'll replace it," I said, writing it down, "this week." Her mouth trembled. "I can't—" "We'll spread the cost over the year," I said, remembering the letter in Billy's looping hand. "No interest. Comfort is not optional." "Your grandmother said things like that," she whispered. "She said we were neighbors, not line items." "She was right," I said. I meant it hard enough to feel it ring inside my ribs. Back in the hall, Paula said nothing. She didn't need to. On 1, a door stood open, stroller half in, half out, the living room taken over by the cheerful tyranny of toys. The Johnsons, Ava and Malik, late 20s, sleep in their eyes, hope in their hands, looked up like we were the cavalry and the audit all at once. "Baby's napping," Ava mouthed. Paula lifted a hand, a little benediction of quiet, and we spoke in whispers. The second bedroom had become a closet to keep the living room clear for crawling knees. "We're on the wait list for a 2-bedroom in your sister building," Malik said, embarrassed, like it was a failing to want more space for growing life. I walked the unit with the kind of eyes you grow when you've been the person doing without. The window paint had peeled to gills. The cabinet door hung on stubbornness. "We can move you sooner," I said. "Same rent through the first year, then we'll talk. I'll take it up with the manager there." Malik stared. Miss Fisher, that's not how this city works." "It is how this building works," Paula said. "Simple as closing a door against bad weather. It always has." We ended in the basement, as all pilgrimages do, surrounded by the quiet industry of boilers and breaker boxes and the humming belly of the place. Paula put her palm to a pipe like she was reading a pulse. If you listen long enough, she said, a building will tell you what keeps it alive. What keeps it alive? I asked, pen hovering. Attention. Yours. I had expected a sermon about money. I got a lesson about presence. Back upstairs in her apartment, she didn't pour tea. She poured ice water and slid me a pencil that had worn down to a devoted nub. Now the books, she said. You can make mercy and still make margin. But order matters. She didn't lecture. She asked questions that made answers grow. How much vacancy can you afford? How much turnover do you invite by being stingy? What's the cost of replacing a tenant versus keeping one? I ran numbers until the numbers ran me, then watched them fall into patterns that looked a lot like common sense carrying a calculator. The secret, Paula said, tapping the page, is that kindness is efficient. It reduces friction. People who feel seen don't leave. People who don't leave don't cost you 3 months of empty halls and fresh paint. And when someone can't pay, I asked, you look at the person, not the month. She held my gaze. But you also keep faith with the whole. A broken covenant with the building hurts everyone. Help is not the same as permission. I felt something lock into place, a hinge, a low final click. Rules, yes, but rules built to keep the doors open, not to slam them in faces. When the sun bent toward evening, I saw the box on her credenza I hadn't noticed before, a shallow cedar case with a brass clasp. She opened it, and the room filled with the smell of an old forest remembering rain. Inside were folded receipts, photographs, and my breath hitched. Checks written in a signature I recognized immediately from ledger margins. P. Hendress. Small amounts here and there over 3 decades. A pediatric bill for a tenant long gone, half the cost of a new roof in '98, the entire elevator modernization in 2005, an envelope addressed to Mrs. Perry with a note, for the good kind of noise, your grandbaby's fan. You've been paying for the building, I said. It wasn't a question. I've been living in the building, she corrected. When you love your home, you fix the dripping things. Sometimes those things are pipes, sometimes they're people. I should have known, I said, and then hated the way shame bent my voice. I should have walked in with curiosity, not a demand. You walked in carrying your own storm, she said. People do. Billy carried hers too. She just remembered to put the umbrella over someone else first. Teach me, I said. Not just the math, the temperament. She leaned back, studying me the way you study a bridge you're about to trust. Start by writing 3 promises. She nodded toward my notebook. 1 to the building, 1 to the tenants, 1 to yourself. I wrote without editing, the way you write when you're afraid you'll rethink your way out of bravery. To the building, I will see you every day, not only when something breaks. To the tenants, I will treat you like neighbors, not lines. Your dignity is part of the rent I owe you. To myself, I will not confuse urgency with importance. I will lead the way I want to be remembered, not the way I'm pressured to perform. Paula read them and did not applaud. He nodded once, which felt larger. Good. Now translate them into policies. Policies? Promises without procedures are confetti. Let's make them hold. We spent 2 hours writing what looked suspiciously like a humane operating manual. Response time for repairs that respected sleep. A hardship protocol with clear steps, not favors. A maintenance calendar that treated prevention as an art. I titled it House Rules That Keep Us a House and wanted, absurdly, to frame it. When I had to leave, the sky above the river was a band of vague lavender, and the city had started to glitter like it remembered what joy felt like. At my door, Paula paused. "Clara," she said, and there was something unguarded in the way she let my name sit in the air. "There's a man who will come to you soon with a very expensive smile. He will offer you more money than you've ever seen to turn this building into something it isn't. Developers," I guessed, stomach dipping. "Merchants of erasure," she said gently. "When he comes, don't meet him alone." "I won't," I said, though the idea of needing anyone made an old part of me flinch. "Will you—" "I'll be there," she said. "Some debts can't be repaid, Clara. They can only be continued." She closed her door softly, leaving me in a hall that smelled faintly of lemon oil and some unnameable safety. In my own small unit, a temporary space until I decided whether to stay, I lay awake for a long time listening to the building breathe. A pipe settling, an elevator sighing, a baby laughing in its sleep down on one. It sounded like a chorus that had practiced for years for the moment I would finally learn their part. The next morning, I called an HVAC company and ordered an air conditioner for Mrs. Perry with a service window that respected her knitting club. I emailed the manager at the sister building about the Johnsons, attached our new hardship protocol, and wrote, "We carry people to the next room, not the curb." It felt dangerous and perfect to put that in writing. At noon, Linda stuck her head into the office, eyes scanning the maintenance calendar spread across the desk. "It looks different," she said. "It is," I answered. "Billy would like it," she murmured. "I'm trying to," I said, then stopped, choosing the harder truth. "No, I'm learning to." After she left, I took out my grandmother's letter from the locked drawer and read the last paragraph again until the ink rose off the page and decided to live in my bloodstream. Money comes and goes, but the relationships we build and the kindness we show, that's what lasts. By evening, I wasn't a different woman, but I was a woman who finally knew the direction of the path under her feet. He arrived wearing confidence, the way some men wear cologne, thick enough to leave a film on your teeth. "Evan Ward," he said, extending a hand that had never lifted anything heavier than an offer sheet. "We love what you've done with the place." His grin said, "We love what we can replace." We stood in the foyer, beneath the antique mirror that had watched 4 generations adjust their collars before stepping into weather. Evan adjusted his cufflinks in it, uninvited. "I didn't contact your firm." "Of course not," he said, undeterred. "Good opportunities introduce themselves." He gestured at the bay windows like a game show host. "Corner lot, Riverside, 4 stories, ripe. We'll go 8 floors of glass, amenity deck with river views, fitness, pet spa. Residents love dog saunas for some reason." He laughed alone. "You, Miss Fisher, walk away with $15 million. Clean. No more boiler calls at 2 a.m. The number landed with a hush. $15 million. I tried not to picture my student loans whimpering and disappearing like a bad dream. I tried not to picture a house that wasn't rented by the month, a silence without the electricity bill plotting its next ambush. "Let me stop you there," I said. He tipped his head, indulgent. "Everything is just a building until it's redeveloped. Nostalgia is rarely zoned." I almost replied, then remembered Paula's warning. "When he comes, don't meet him alone." I let the silence grow legs. The elevator sighed. Evan turned as Paula stepped out, neat in navy, a silk scarf that pulled the sky down to her throat. She didn't look at him. She looked at me, as if confirming I still occupied my own spine. "Am I late?" "Right on time," I said. Evan brightened, the way men do when they assume an older woman will be mild. "You must be on the association board," he said, always thrilled to include community voices. Paula's smile did not include him. "We are the community." "What are you selling us today? Disappearance?" "Value," he said, smoothly. "For Miss Fisher? For the neighborhood? New tax base, new retail. We beautify." Paula's eyes traveled slowly from his shoes to his hairline, inventorying an argument she'd heard since the city learned to sell itself. Beautification is what people call it when they paint over belonging. He laughed again, lighter this time. Look, I appreciate sentiment, but you can't deny the math. The land is worth more than the structure. We can do cash or, better, equity in the new development. You keep a slice of the upside. You'll be thanking me in 2 years. We moved to the office. He unfolded glossy renderings that reflected our faces like tiny ghosts. Where Mrs. Perry's wreath would be, a concierge desk staffed by men who never learn the names of babies on the first floor. Where the lemon tree would be, a juice bar selling lemons back to the people who used to grow them on windowsills. What about the tenants? I asked. Relocation packages, he said, as if reading from a laminated card. Generous. They'll have options. Options, Paula repeated, tasting the word. Like the curb, the couch, the aunt across town with a pull-out sofa. He lowered his voice, conspiratorial. Miss Fisher, we both know that tenant mix can be unpredictable. We create consistency, upscale retail, target demographic stability. I prefer neighbors, I said. He sat back, smile thinning. 15 becomes 17 if you sign this quarter. The room tilted again, this time not with shock, but with the careful slide of a test. 17 million. It wasn't a number. It was a needle aimed at the seam of everything I'd written in my notebook. Promises without procedures are confetti. Paula's voice, not mine. Did I have procedures yet, or only confetti with good intentions? Come see the roof with me, I said. He blinked. The roof? The place you want to erase, Paula said pleasantly. Start where weather starts. We climbed. On the roof, the river unrolled like a ribbon no one had earned. Wind pushed hair into my mouth. The city breathed its 1,000-voiced exhale. Evan glanced at his loafers, unhappy. Listen, I said. To what? To the hum, Paula said. To what keeps this alive. He laughed, but quieter. The gulls sketched white commas in the air. Traffic whispered. Somewhere below us, a baby tried the sound of its own delight until it startled itself and slept again. I watched Evan listen despite himself and felt the strangest hope. This building is efficient, he said, recentering the conversation. But it's also small. Think of the jobs our project creates. Jobs, Paula repeated, that vanish when the ribbon is cut. What about jobs that last 30 years? The man who fixes the boiler, the woman who cleans the halls, the hardware store we use because they still cut keys without rolling their eyes. He put his hands on his hips in a stance I recognized from playgrounds. You can't keep a city in amber. And you can't keep a life in a spreadsheet, I said. There's profit here. It's just measured differently. We went back down in a silence he didn't own. In the hall, Mrs. Perry opened her door, drawn by the noise. She looked at Evan's renderings and then at his face, with the frank curiosity of a woman who'd outlived flattery. Are those pictures of where I'm supposed to live? Evan brightened, slipping into pitch. We'll find you something comparable. Do they have knitting on Tuesdays and babies who laugh at 10 p.m.? He hesitated. We'll, have common areas. She nodded, satisfied in the way of someone who just weighed a man and found him 90% helium. I prefer my own couch, she said, and closed the door with a soft click. In the office again, Evan slid the top sheet forward, letter of intent. He uncapped a pen and placed it theatrically beside the margin. Ms. Fisher, this is a once-in-a-generation exit. The neighborhood is turning. You're either the wind or the leaves. Paula looked at me, not him. Choose, her gaze said. Not just the building. Choose yourself. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I drew a line, clean, final, through the signature block. Then I wrote across the margin in my grandmother's language, "We are not for sale." Evan's smile held for a beat too long, like a mask that forgot its cue. "That's unfortunate," he said softly. "You'll reconsider when the roof leaks. We'll replace it next spring. And when your tenants complain about outdated amenities, we'll give them dignity," Paula said. "It's very in this season." He collected his pages, careful not to touch the sentence I'd written. At the door he paused. "You're making an emotional decision." "I'm making a professional decision, and I'm choosing a business model where people stay because we see them. My margins will be fine, my sleep will be better." He offered a last smile that didn't reach anything human. "Call me when the sentiment wears off." "It won't," Paula said. When the door closed, I let the adrenaline go. It shook out of my hands, a small storm leaving. Paula rested a palm on the desk. "Proud," she said simply. I almost said yes. I was surprised at the honesty that fell out of me. The number was loud. "Of course it was," she said. "Temptation always brings a microphone. You answered with a choir." "The choir?" "Everyone who lives here. And everyone who ever will, because you told a developer, no." We walked the halls as if blessing them. On one, the Johnsons' door was ajar. Malik was assembling a second-hand crib, Allen key clenched in his teeth, Ava timing contractions that were not contractions yet. On 2, Mrs. Perry had the new AC humming like contentment. On 3, a teenager practiced scales, a voice learning how to carry its own body. Somewhere a pot simmered, somewhere a window stuck, then decided to cooperate. Back in 4B, Paula poured iced tea into glasses that sweated rings onto coasters older than me. "There's something you should see," she said, and brought out a slim folder I hadn't noticed in the cedar box. Inside, a single page, typed, the ink faded to a dignified gray. At the top, Memorandum of Understanding. Below, 2 signatures, W. Fisher and P. Hendress, and a line I hadn't seen in the photocopies. "If at any point a sale of the property is proposed that will materially harm the existing community, both parties agree to oppose it in good faith." "You had a veto," I whispered. "We had a promise," she said. "Not to a bank, to each other." I looked out at the city and saw not towers, but rooms. Not parcels, but people. I felt suddenly fiercely protective of the way the afternoon light pooled on the herringbone, like honey that couldn't be bottled and sold. "Clara," Paula said quiet, "legacies are only as alive as the next person's courage." I lifted my glass. "To courage, then." "To continuing," she said, and clinked. Night came on like relief. I sat at my desk and wrote 3 more lines into house rules that keep us a house. "We will not sell our neighbors' futures for our own comfort. We will measure profit and lengths of tenancy, not just balance sheets. We will say no, kindly, clearly, to those who confuse extraction with progress." When I put the notebook down, my phone buzzed with an email from Evan Ward. "Final offer, $18.2 million, expires Friday." I deleted it without opening. Out the window, the building breathed. I breathed back. Winter found the building first in the stairwell. Cold creeping along the handrail, breath blooming into small ghosts. Paula noticed it before I did. Of course she did. "Boiler sulking," she said, pressing 2 fingers to the radiator in 2A like a nurse taking a pulse. "Give it a day. It'll apologize." It didn't. I called the tech. We stood over valves with clipboards and corrective eyebrows until the whole system sighed back to life, and the heat came shouldering through the pipes like a promise kept. On the way back up, Paula took the steps slower than usual. She hid it under a joke about getting old. The joke didn't hide anything. Over the next weeks, her walks shortened.
The kettle took longer to whistle. She made a list for me in that precise script I now associated with safety. Roof, spring, do it sunny. Elevator, service before it asks. 1B, check crib screws after growth spurts. 2A, Tuesdays, knitting, leave the hallway light warm. Hallway paint, same color even if you're bored. The lemon tree, water, talk to it. It listens. I read the list standing at her window, the river wearing January like a veil. Are you telling me to manage a building or to stay human? Same list, she said. She smiled, then winced, small and fleeting. I pretended not to see the second thing. The first fall of snow made the city briefly honest. Plows carved their careful paths. Kids in boots negotiated treaties at the curb. In our foyer, a wet constellation of footprints suggested a galaxy finding its shape. I put down a runner before Paula could, felt triumphant for an hour, then found she'd already taped the edges with gaffer tape so no one would trip. Show off, I said, and she laughed. It tired her. She put a hand to the doorframe and breathed. Sit, I said. I'll make tea. You'll make tea, she repeated, amused by my seriousness. The student becomes the person who doesn't oversleep a kettle. We drank in silence, which had stopped being awkward and started being how we kept company when words were redundant. Clara, she said finally, not looking at me, do you know why I asked for 4B and not a check back? Because you wanted a home. I wanted witnesses, she corrected. A bank account can't say your name when you come up the stairs. A building can. I'll say your name, I said, fiercer than I meant to. That's not the point. She reached for my hand and rested her fingers lightly, like placing a bookmark. The point is that the good you do should be visible in the ordinary. If it only exists as a number, it disappears when the page turns. January tore itself off the calendar and left February raw. The day Paula didn't answer her door on the second knock, the hallway didn't feel like our hallway. I let myself in with the key she'd given me in a ceremony that felt suspiciously like a friendship. She was sitting in the wingback, ankles crossed neatly, cardigan buttoned wrong by one. The newspaper lay on her lap unread. She looked up and tried to rearrange her face into reassurance. Call someone, she said. It sounded like she'd tried not to say it for an hour. The hospital room had a view of a different river, one that moved people in and out under fluorescent weather. Paula refused drama the way some people refuse dessert. Nicely, but implacably. She let me fluff the pillow anyway. She let me fuss with the chart. She let the Johnsons send a photo of the baby in a onesie that said, "Building kid," and smiled with her whole face. Don't bring flowers, she told Mrs. Perry. Who brought a plant? This woman, she muttered, but the affection swamped the complaint. The doctor said words like manageable and monitor and we'll see. We saw. Some days were good, the kind where we pretended we were catching up after separate vacations. Some days were slow, like the world had thickened. Read to me, she said on a day like that. What? Not the news. Something useful. I read from House Rules That Keep Us a House. She stopped me to amend Rule 7. Contractors must bring drop cloths. If they don't, we hand them ours and charge them later. You can add a clause, she said. Call it the dignity surcharge. I wrote it down, hands shaking harder than the joke deserved. She pretended not to see that too. On a Tuesday that insisted on being bright, Paula asked to go home. The discharge nurse curbed her skepticism when she realized half the building had shown up with rides. Linda organized them like a parade. Someone had polished the banister. Mrs. Perry had baked a pie that could have settled a century-old feud. At 4B, we took the elevator. We could walk, she said out of habit. We could also behave. Back in the apartment, she sat by the window and let the familiar light do the job only it could. I made tea, burning one finger in reverence. We watched the river, slow and sure, pretending to be permanent. Over the next week, she gave things away with ceremony. The cedar box to me, it smells like keeping promises. A book of poems to Ava. For nights a baby refuses to distinguish between poetry and hunger. A set of old tools to Malik for the crib screws. A scarf to Mrs. Perry For days you want to be a flag.
What do you keep? I asked. The window, she said. And you? On a Sunday, the building gathered without an invitation. The teenager from 3A played guitar soft enough to be permission. The lemon tree threw a real lemon at the exact right time, and Mrs. Perry clapped like a witness to a small saint. People told stories, not big ones, the kind that identify ownership. You were the first person who learned my name. You knocked when I didn't answer. You wrote "we" in a note about my broken stove. Paula listened like someone collecting rain in a cup. When the room finally emptied, she handed me an envelope. My name in the tidy script that had guided me through pipes and policies and becoming a different kind of adult. Not yet, she said, when the hallway feels too quiet. I blocked out the possibility the way you block out a draft with a towel under the door. Towels don't stop weather. That night, a nurse called at 3:11 a.m. The building woke up anyway. You can tell when a home wakes up. It gets still in a way that makes you hear the small noises. Elevator cables resting. A faucet somewhere deciding not to drip after all. In 4B, the lamp by the wingback was still on, a circle of light carved into the dark. Paula looked like herself. Neat, dignified, not sorry. I sat beside the chair and held the hand that had fixed dripping things. I cried, not like in films, more like a pipe finally releasing its trapped air. We didn't plan a funeral, we planned a service call. We repaired the day. The lobby filled with neighbors and the smell of lemon bars and the sound of people who understood that grief is maintenance you do together. Linda put out a guest book. I wrote the address of the building as if Paula had lived in the street itself. Later, when the hall finally did go too quiet, I opened the envelope. Clara, if you're reading this, I'm somewhere I don't have to manage the boiler. Don't be sentimental on my behalf. I've had 3 decades of exactly what I bargained for. You are the right person for this work, not because you don't flinch, everyone flinches, but because you flinch and keep your hand out anyway. I left a small fund with Roberta for emergencies you can't name yet. Use it the way you would use a coat handed to a neighbor who didn't know it would snow. Don't sell. Don't harden. Keep the rules soft where they touch people and firm where they touch greed. When you are scared, make tea. When you are tired, fix one small thing. When you doubt yourself, read the ledger from July 93 and remember that we choose each other. And that's how buildings stand. P. I pressed the paper flat, like it could stop my heart from folding. Then I did what the letter told me. I made tea. I fixed one small thing, the loose screw on the mailbox of a tenant who still forgot to check their mail. I read July 93. I chose us again. Spring finally kept its promise. The roofers came on a bright Monday, boots respectful on the old tar, radios low. The building smelled like new beginnings and hot metal. The elevator hummed the good kind of hum. The lemon tree put out improbable blossoms, like it knew something I didn't. We held a small ceremony that wasn't a ceremony. Mrs. Perry read a poem about staying. The Johnsons' baby clapped at the wrong places, which made them the right places. I took the cedar box back up to 4B and put it in the closet where Paula had kept the winter coats, where necessary things live. We added one more page to house rules that keep us a house. When someone leaves us, we keep what they built by using it. We don't build a shrine, we build a schedule. Tea first. By summer, the building had learned our new rhythm. People came home later because the light lasted. A kid on 3 practiced skills, and then one miraculous night sang without fear. The AC in 2A murmured like contentment. I could walk the halls with my eyes closed and know where I was by the smell of dinner, the squeak of a hinge, the exact place the floorboard complained, and then forgave. A letter arrived from Ward Urban with another number and another deadline. I wrote across the margin, in my grandmother's words this time, "Neighbors, not line items." I mailed it back. They stopped writing. On the anniversary of the day I first knocked on 4B, I stood in the foyer and looked into the antique mirror. I did not adjust anything. I didn't need to. The building had adjusted me. I went up to the roof with 2 mugs and set one beside the old antenna out of habit. Wind pulled at my hair. Somewhere below, a baby laughed on time. I said Paula's name to the sky and felt the building say it back in the language of radiators and elevator cables and lemon blossoms. We were still here. That was the victory. Churity, is your turn. Has someone ever taught you a lesson that changed how you treat people, quietly in the everyday? Where are you watching from, and what's one small rule you live by that keeps your world kind? If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next series. New chapters every week. Thanks for being part of this community.